Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by the Time We Discuss studio. Today, I have Dr. Laquana Cooke here, and it's time we discuss a career as a tenured professor. Dr. Cooke, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Dr. Cooke, when I think of college professors, I draw my own experiences when I was pursuing my degree. I remember my various professors that I had, the classes that they taught. And then I think about some of my friends that they graduated, they went on to become teachers, having the summers off, the winter break off. Sounds pretty sweet. Uh, but but then I think about my kids and what education looked like during 2020 and 2021. And
Mhm.
I think about teachers that are speaking all day or have to be on their feet all day or even Zoom all day or some other technology. So my perception of what teaching could be like has drastically changed from even when I was a kid up through the present. And even now, I'm sure I don't have a complete picture of what it's like to be in shoes such as yours. So
Mhm.
all that being said, tell me, what's a typical day like? What is it like to be a college professor?
A college professor, I can tell you this is not just about standing in front of a class, just teaching fun content. There's a lot of preparation that goes behind it, in terms of what we call the pedagogy and how we're delivering the content, but also what type of content and what's our philosophy behind how we are delivering the content. So it's not just standing in front of a class. Also, when we think about as being a college professor, it includes service. Like, what are we doing in the sustainability and the sort of the culture of the university, right? Like, what are we contributing in terms of like the culture and also like the logistics and the flow of what's happening at the university, depending on what type of service you're doing. And of course, there's the inevitable, like, what type of research are you doing? There's the expectation in terms of like continuing your research as a scholar. What's really awesome about teaching at Westchester University is that it's a teaching institution, um, but also they expect our scholarship to tie into our teaching, which we call the teacher scholar model. So your teaching is supposed to fulfill and sort of like tap into your scholarship, and reversibly, your scholarship is supposed to tap into your teaching as well. So back to your question, what is a typical day? As a professor, you have all these convoluted, ideas coming together in how you're going to have your presentation slides and how you're going to lecture. So you have, all these things together when you're doing that. I would say as a English, I'm actually in the English department. So I like to say when people say, "Oh, you're a college professor, what do you teach?" I say I teach in the English department, but I teach everything but English, jokingly, because I'm a bit of an outlier. I teach game design, game production, gaming, a lot of gaming concepts, but also usability studies, digital humanities, and of course, the typical writing classes and writing for pop culture. But I like being this outlier, but also feeling like I am kind of trailblazing what, an English department is going to look like in 2024, 2025, and so forth, because it's, a lot of people like myself that are teaching in other areas, but including STEM in their teaching of writing as well. So I wouldn't say I'm so much of a unicorn. A lot of my colleagues in that came in my cohort is kind of doing the same thing. I teach a lot of fun classes. I teach writing for pop culture, a lot of grading of essays and so forth. And like I said before, I teach in biz tech writing, a usability course, which is awesome because it's directly tied to my research and scholarship, which is gaming, and game design. So I like how I can create this sort of like common thread in that as well. And I also teach in the youth empowerment urban studies minor. So that's my service side where how I can include media production and gaming and all that stuff from a service perspective, and kind of like prepping students to do that in Philly. So that's my day-to-day as a college professor that teaches at the university. And I could go into the service and the research, but I'll let you steer this big ship.
Thank you. That's a lot. That is amazing. Um, so it sounds like you teach a lot of really fun and interesting classes. So my next question, how much control do you have over the types of classes that you teach? What is that like? Say you want to start, you have an idea for a new class. Are you able to create classes? How does that all work?
I wouldn't say there's a lot of control. I would say there's a lot of what's the word? Strategic planning for courses within the context of not only the department, but also your college, which is I'm in the College of Arts and Humanities, as well as Westchester University, right? So case in point, I teach a game design class, right? That's part of the digital humanities. So the prefix is DH, which is digital humanities. So obviously I'm not teaching game design and computer science, right? So I have to create a course that's within my department, college, and obviously that comes under the institution as well. And so there are a number of different players in terms of like the bureaucracy of how you go about creating a course. That's why I say it's a little more complicated than just saying, oh, I want to teach this course on Pokemon, right? Like it has to tie to the existing curriculum that's set there, because we do have some pseudo like curriculum standards if we're thinking like K through 12 language, right? So we have curriculum that we have to follow to make sure that whatever course we create, we're hitting those standards or expectations or learning outcomes, we call them as well. So I would say it's relatively easier when it's coming from your discipline and within your department and program. Now there are some outliers. I would say my game design class is an outlier, but how I connect it to make sure it's correlated to the expectations and learning outcomes of our curriculum.
That's really, really cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you talked about research briefly. What is that like on a macro level where you are at your institution as compared to say other institutions? Do you know as a tenured college professor, regardless of where you are you required to do research? What would that look like?
Well, you are. Honestly, I only know from the stance of like when I was in the market looking for a tenure track position, but also I have some colleagues that are at R1 institutions, research one institutions, which the expectations for research is much higher. Westchester right now just reclassified. We're actually in R2, which is pretty cool, but it increases the expectations for research, but it's not as precedent as teaching is still, right? So we're still teaching. So research for me here at Westchester University is a big part of my quote unquote contract, and that's required. I don't know if I could share the percentage, but they break it up into like a percentage or whatever. But it is like the second most important thing to my my contract. And so for me, it's relatively, I wouldn't say easy to do research, but I've been groomed coming out of like R1 institutions as for my master's as well as my doctorate program. I came out of like R1 institutions, heavy research. So and not, but anyway. So I'm used to that. And so coming in, I had some things, kind of brewing already, coming into like the tenure track. And it was just a matter of me executing now as a tenure track professor. And typically what I've learned, and this is kind of the advice I give to young grad students that are, about to come out of, the graduate program looking for tenure track, is to build on, to have a research that you could build on, and not so much keep creating new types of research and new types of, you want to build like a tree, right? Like branches. You want to branch off a bit so that you're not reinventing constantly, because you have to come up with a research plan. It has to come out of a certain methodology and method, etc. You have to collect data, right? And then you have to parse through the data and analyze the data and then write about it. And then not only just write about it, but you have to find a venue that finds your work deemed special enough to be able to publish that work, right? So you're not just doing research for research's sake. Like, I want to do research and just leave it here in the corner, right? Like you have to disseminate it somewhere and somehow. So you also have to connect it to different journals or books, right? You want to look for a publisher and so forth. So it's not a night and day thing in terms of like research. It is a slow rolling process. But my advice is always through that slow rolling process to branch your research off to other things. And that's typically what I've done. And also I've tied my research into my teaching as well as my as well as my service. So that kind of helps, in terms of the sustainability as as a college professor to be able to do all three things.
That makes sense the way you're talking about building your research upon itself, so you're not starting from scratch all over again. That makes a lot of sense, and I never would have thought to do that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But before you talked briefly about your education, you talked about you getting your master's degree, your doctorate. To teach at the college level, do you need to have a doctorate? Can you get by with just a master's? What does that look like?
I can't speak for every institution. I would say your chances of getting a tenure track is exponentially higher if you have a PhD. Now, there are exceptions to this norm if you have a master's and you are, working and you've worked in industry for whatever it is for quite some time. So that adds into your sort of like credibility and your capital. And you apply for a job, you get it. And that's good. That's awesome. Sometimes folks start off as as an adjunct or a lecturer, and they put enough time and skin in the game as a lecturer. And sometimes depending on the institution, the rules of the institution, they sometimes hire you as a tenured professor after some time. Again, I can't speak for but these are different cases I've seen over my career span.
So, Dr. Cooke, I know that at some institutions, advising can either be a separate employee or it could be the faculty members that do the advising. I've seen it in both cases.
Mhm.
So, what's that like for you? Are you seeing a lot of that personally, or is that not really happening where you are?
You mean advising in terms of students?
Yes.
Oh yes. Oh yes. We advise. We definitely advise. We were allocated some advisees. These, yeah. Um yeah, and we typically, see them throughout the duration of their time, or sometimes we get some transfer students. Now, the number of advisees is based on, the department and your load, et cetera, because I know I have some colleagues in another department that have substantially higher advisees.
Okay, so you're not just standing in front of a room lecturing. You're teaching. You're doing research. You're advising. You are wearing a lot of different hats.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
if you're involved with different service projects, that just is going to add on to it as well. There is a lot going on in your world.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. And it's funny, I just talked I forgot who I was talking to, honestly, but I was just bringing it back to fundamentally like the purpose of the academy, right? The university. It's for the betterment of society. We're supposed to be you know, um, supporting and bettering society through what we're doing on a university level. And all these different hats we're talking about is a manifestation of that sort of like call to action as college professors. So I would say a lot of our time is put into advising in different sort of like ways, right? Whether we're talking about formally, where we're giving students, but also informally, I would have students just come by my office or email me, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I would love to, get together and talk this through. And that happens often, even, in class, like students talk to you after class or even during class. We have a lot of, discussions. So we always have to be on in terms of like being an advisor.
That makes sense. Let me ask you this. So I try to think of people that might be drawn to this particular occupation, and people might see it as like different things as a deterrent. what do you think would be a deterrent for someone? Like if you don't like, if public speaking is an issue for you, you
Mhm.
might have an issue doing this. Is there something like that that you can think of that people might identify as this either could be for them or could not be for them?
Oh, wow. I've seen all types of people on the Myers-Briggs. You know, you do the Myers-Briggs test.
Yep,
I've
yep.
seen and I've experienced it in department meetings as well. I'm like, oh wow, okay. Oh, it's a lot of different personalities and characteristics and strengths and weaknesses. And honestly, there is no, black and white to this. I really just feel like you either just want to do it or don't want to do it. And those who want to do it um are weeded out in terms of their intentions and purpose, are weeded out through the process of getting your doctorate and going through the tenure track application process. It's not easy getting the tenure track position especially in this economy. So and then finally you're on tenure track, but then you're probationary, which means you after 4 or 5 years, you're up for evaluation. It's not guaranteed that you're going to be hired to be tenured. So it's so many like checks and balances, and also like sifting processes in terms of like, if you're built for this. And a lot of times sometimes I'm like, yeah, am I built for this? And then then it's, now it's 7 years later. I'm like, I guess I am. I'm still here. I guess I am built for this. So, and literally, and that's what I love about this this career. You could come from many different paths and trajectories, and I mean, I like to say there is a traditional route with getting a doctorate or whatever, but you have some folks who are, maybe, I don't want to be an ageist, but like 30, 40, 50 that go into the doctoral program and then, want to go teach. I mean, it's not as limiting as if you want to be an MMA fighter, right? Like, you have a short window to be a fighter, but as a, college professor, the window is not so, short, like you can enter if you're, at a different stage of your life. I have friends actually that's almost a retirement of their, current career, and doing their doctorate to they want to be a college professor. And I think that's awesome that there are many different entry points at different times in one's life that they can come into this career.
That's awesome. That's really, really good information. Um, so this is the part where I like to ask a little bit of a fun question. It has absolutely nothing to do with your job or anything. So, Dr. Cooke, your question.
Oh
I want you
gosh.
to think about the different places that you visited. Could be for vacation, for work, etc. What is
Mhm.
one place that you visited that you weren't excited to visit, but end up having a really good time and you're surprised just by how much you liked it?
Mm. Okay. Um, it's not an exact place. It is a state, but it's more of the experience I didn't think I was gonna enjoy so much, right? So a friend and I, we did a road trip down the West Coast, starting in Seattle, and then made our way down to San Fran, right? And literally, we were living in a small little Hyundai Elantra with a styrofoam cooler. And we would find each night a different hotel to sleep in to our next destination. And we had different points, like we did um the Oregon Caves, the Avenue of the Trees and the Redwoods, and then we also did Astoria where we with the Goonies and experiencing It's Not a Tumor. Like we went to that big museum, like, and we did the Peanuts museum. Like I didn't think I would enjoy living in a car eating turkey sandwiches and trail mix. And this is pre-kids, by the way. And I've
I
traveled the
assumed it probably
world.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were in the trunk.
No, yeah, they're in a trunk. And there were so like many like unknowns and so many things I've experienced like in nature wise. Like I didn't know I was And I'm not really a nature person, but to just the awe of nature and visiting, like I said, the caves and then Lake Quinault and um all of that. And I was just in awe of nature. So, and like I said, I've been, to Europe, I've been to London, and, Paris and, the Caribbean's like 50,000 times. And I would have to say that was probably my most, memorable, but also fun, life-changing trip.
I can see where you're coming from with that. At one point in time, my one brother lived in Arizona, and my other brother and I, we actually took a train out to visit him.
Mm.
And then we were there for a week, 10 days, something like that. And then the three of us drove back across the country. And it's interesting that I really treasure those 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was, because
Yep.
it was just the three of us and the memories that were created and the inside
Mm-hmm.
jokes that persist.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite an experience. So I
Yeah,
hear where
yeah,
you're coming from with that.
yeah, yeah. So you get it, you get it.
Absolutely. Dr. Cook, the last thing I want to say, whenever I have someone on the show here, I like to give them a couple minutes to talk about something that either a project they're working on or a cause they believe in, or something like that. So I'd like to give you like a minute or two to talk about something. The floor is yours.
Oh, wow. Okay. So most of my research and also, like I said, some of my teaching, but a lot of my service is in developing STEM programs for undervalued and disenfranchised youth. So that's the case with iCamp Summer Media Academy, developed 7 years ago for Philly high school students to um, come to campus and engage in this week-long intensive production workshop with experts and faculty, coming from, Westchester University, but also some local Philly artists as well. And that has been like a major, component of my scholarship and my service. And I truly believe in it. But what I'm doing with that is building it out to not just be a 1 week program, but also to be a 4 credit college course for these students to now gain credit. So my life's goal, to be honest with you, is to build more authentic, sustainable pipelines for youth to go to college and to see if college is the thing for them. That's not to say that college is for everyone, but this is an opportunity for them to have a taste and also have a leg up if they have this taste, right, with a college course. So I've been building, not just the iCamp, but also the work I do in terms of my consultant work, like my other professional work with the MBA and Microsoft, and building STEM programs through sports and so forth. And it's really exciting. Like I was just at All-Star Weekend in Indiana through the blizzard, but we were just there, doing some court science. And although, we have Tim Hardaway right here, talking with the youth, and another WNBA star, like my heart just really warmed, just connecting with, the 200 to 300, youth that were engaging with this court science material and activities. So to see them light up and say, and see, knowledge in science and STEM and all this stuff, in a different light, and not in this sort of like unreachable way, but to see in the way like, hey, I engage with this every day, but now I see it through this like extra lens of STEM. And so, and that's sort of the next chapter of what I'm trying to do and build other pathways to enjoying building knowledge and learning about this stuff.
That's awesome. That's very admirable and honorable what you're doing with that iCamp project. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Dr. Cook, I appreciate you spending time with us tonight on Time We Discuss and telling us what it's like to be an educator. So thank you for everything that you do for empowering the youth, and thank you for being a part of the show.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Thanks for stopping by the studio. My name is Dan, and this is Time We Discuss. I really enjoyed speaking with Dr. Laquana Cook, and I hope you enjoyed the time too. If there's a profession that you want me to cover, make sure you put a comment and let me know, and I will get that person for you. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. That'll do it. See you next time on Time We Discuss.